I love the 10mm round as much as anyone, and the 40 Smith & Wesson is a low-hanging fruit round to make fun of, as many large gun tubers have made fun of in the past, such as pre-NRA, different team baseball hat-wearing Coleon Noir, and Jordan Winkler, basically insinuating that you like both guys and girls if you carry a 40 Smith & Wesson, as well as Tim from the Military Arms Channel vitriolic hatred for the round as it nearly killed the 10mm. But I'm not going to make fun of it. Mainly because the 40 Smith & Wesson is closer to Jeff Cooper, yes, that Jeff Cooper's vision for the 10mm round than the actual 10mm round is. The story of the 10mm and 40 cal Smith & Wesson cartridges are so intertwined, I'm going to do a quick video on them so I can devote the Delta Elite and KCPD 4026 videos to the guns themselves. As with famed outdoorsman Elmer Keith dreaming up and creating the 44 Magnum, the idea of the 10mm was created by someone most gun guys have heard of and give much respect to, Lieutenant Colonel Jeff Cooper. If you haven't heard his name, you most certainly know of his ideas and the terms he coined. The 4 rules of gun safety. This is Cooper. The conditions of readiness for your carry gun. That is also Cooper. Cooper also put a color code to combat mindset, and he originally coined the term hoplophobia. Cooper wanted to create a semi-auto cartridge that had better ballistics than the 45 ACP and more stopping power than the 9x19mm Parabellum. His original intent was for a 200-grain bullet fired at 1,000 feet per second. When asked to develop this cartridge for the newly developed Bren 10 handgun in 1983, Swedish manufacturer FFV Norma AB actually increased the power over Cooper's concept and created a cartridge that had more power than the .357 Magnum and less than the .41 Magnum. While there was excitement for the Bren 10 pistol, rushed and substandard production as well as its high price led to its demise. This demise might have brought the 10mm cartridge down with it had it not been for Colt deciding to produce the Delta Elite, a 10mm 1911, a pistol which I'll review and release a video for shortly in 1987. The Delta Elite single-handedly kept the 10mm cartridge alive for 3 years until Smith & Wesson released the 1006 series in 1990 and Glock introduced the Glock 20 in 1991. The biggest boost for the cartridge came from the fallout of the 1986 Miami shootout, where several FBI agents, armed mostly with .38 revolvers and 9mm semi-autos, were injured or killed going against 2 bank robbers. In reality, only one, because one was knocked out for most of the fight, armed mainly with a Mini-14. The robber with the Mini-14 was hit several times by 9mm and .38 special rounds, but kept going, killing 2 FBI agents and wounding 6. The FBI decided that agents should be armed with the semi-automatic pistols with greater stopping power. It was originally decided to adopt the 10mm in the Smith & Wesson 1076, but they found recoil too excessive for many of the agents in the field. During some more testing with 9mm and 45 ACP, FBI Firearms Training Unit Special Agent in Charge, John Hall, offered his personal Colt Delta Elite with some light-loaded 10mm ammunition. They found that this load to have acceptable terminal performance without the heavy recoil from the full-power 10mm. The FBI contacted Smith & Wesson to produce a pistol based off the 4506, a large frame handgun that was made for the 45 ACP. Smith & Wesson found that the reduced powder left more airspace in the cartridge, so they, secretly along with Winchester, developed a cartridge that would shorten the case, and this would allow loading into the smaller frame 9mm pistols. It also uses small pistol primers rather than large. The 40 Smith & Wesson cartridge, along with the 4006 pistol, debuted in January 17, 1990. The funny thing is that somehow Glock actually beat Smith & Wesson by announcing the Glock 22 and 23 a week before Smith & Wesson's announcement. It seems that Glock somehow got their hands on some 40 Smith & Wesson ammo, and since they had most of the engineering for the Glock 20 already complete, they simply adopted the 10mm design with the smaller 9mm frames to produce the Glock 22. Early Glocks had issues with the Glock Kaboom due to the large area of unsupported casehead, but most of these were determined to be from hand-loaded overpressurized ammo. While Smith & Wesson pistols were popular early, such as my KCPD 4026, which I'll also do a video on shortly, the Glock went out in the long run with the FBI and law enforcement. Also boosting the 40 Smith & Wesson's popularity was the so-called assault weapons ban in 1994, which limited new production magazines to 10 rounds. Since people were getting fewer rounds anyway, they decided to go with the stopping power of the 40 over the ubiquitous 9mm. Since then, with the sunset of the assault weapons ban and improvements in ammunition, many law enforcement agencies as well as the FBI have switched back to the 9mm. While I shot my Delta Elite and KCPD 4026 in the same outing, I wanted an apples-to-apples comparison between the 10mm and 40 Smith & Wesson, so I took my Gen 3 Glock 20 and Glock 22 out and fired a magazine full of Remington UMC target ammo from each, back to back. The Glock 22 felt pretty much like firing a 9mm, and perhaps I need to do the same test with the Glock 17 and 22, while the 10mm certainly had more recoil. Although recoil doesn't bother me, I can see where less recoil would be a huge advantage to someone who is in a firefight for their lives. While I like to make fun of the 40 like many others, I can see a place for it. And in reality, the 40 Smith & Wesson is closer to Lieutenant Colonel Cooper's vision for the 10mm than the actual 10mm cartridge was. Another advantage of having a 40 is that due to its declining popularity, there's actually 40 Smith & Wesson on the shelves during ammo runs, such as what happened after Sandy Hook. And this is the reason why I keep a couple 40 pistols around. If you haven't already, please make sure you know where your elected officials and the groups who represent you stand. Make sure you're following your primary elections and vote in the primaries. This is where gun rights can be won or lost, not the general election. Research and know where the NRA stands on issues. You might just realize they have more in common with Feinstein than they do you. Finally, make sure you join the GOA, a no-compromise organization that helps keep you informed of what is really going on, and most importantly, your state's organization, who in most states does most of the heavy lifting in protecting your rights. Please check out my other videos, comment, like, and subscribe. Also check out my Facebook, Twitter, and who I support on Patreon. Thank you for watching, and as always, have a great day.
So, here goes. Here's the 40 Smith & Wesson. I'm going to try to stay in the same place and maybe try to do a side-by-side on recoil. And that's the 40 Smith & Wesson. Now let's do the Glock 20. There's a definite difference between the two. Like the 40 Smith & Wesson almost feels like a 9mm to me, whereas you can tell that this is amped up some.